Hey, it's me, Jack Sislak, and this is Radical Transparency, the SciSense podcast where we talk about what's new in BI, analytics, and all things data so you don't have to. But you can if you want. We're back with a new ep and a new format. This time around, it's more of a freewheeling conversation with our head of go-to-market, PeggySue Werthessen. We chatted a bunch about what exactly embedded analytics is and where it's going. You'll hear me throughout asking the questions, and then I'll be back at the end to close out this episode. Take it away, me and Peggy Sue from the past. Let's get right into it. Where are clients putting? Let's get right into it. Where are clients putting embedded analytics right now?
Everywhere. That's the joy of embedded analytics, right? So there's embedded analytics, the traditional sense. We talked about this a little bit before, but I'll say it again, which is the ability to take individual visualizations, individual KPIs, and embed them directly within your workflow. So as you're using your favorite CRM tool, or your favorite travel booking tool, or whatever, you just get a little bit of data right in the point where that data is going to be the most helpful. So you're not looking at 20 metrics and lots of different things like you would be in a dashboard. You're just getting kind of just the right information at the right time. But we see we see usage that's even more interesting than that, right? Maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we made it possible to embed analytics into your Alexa. So you could just ask Alexa a question and she can answer back. So you can think about that as a way to embed it into people's lives. Same kind of conversation. You're having a conversation with somebody and they're saying, oh no, I'm doing fine this quarter, whatever. That might be a bad choice. But you just say, hey, Alexa, what's my Q3 results? And she answers. And so it just eliminates that kind of question mark in the conversation, right? You can just get that kind of like, should I wear a sweater or not, right? What's the temperature outside? And so we see that in Alexa. We see it in chatbots and Bulb. These are all kind of pretty old news now from a SciSense perspective, right? We've been doing this for a while.
Right. But not everybody in the world knows
does
it.
It, so it's super, so we should talk about it because it's super exciting and it's super cool. We have the SciSense bulb, which at its simplest, it's really just a bulb that, we can get our hands on the market and you can make it change color, right? And so we just found a way to say, okay, that's great. If you have a KPI and you want to use the bulb to be a KPI indicator, right? Green is good, yellow's bad, red is red is really bad, yellow's really bad.
Yellow's like, hey, check me out.
Check me out, right? Yeah. What's interesting is you kind of think, oh, that's just kind of like a cutesy thing, right? But the reality is humans are incredibly responsive to indicators like that, right?
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's really easy for me to shut down my dashboard, just not open it.
Right.
It's really hard for me to ignore the bulb, right?
Totally, yes.
And in fact, you walk by the support area here at SciSense, they have a bulb on one of the manager's desks, and they use it to monitor kind of the status of the work queue and make sure that everything's okay.
Awesome.
So I think it's fun, and they used to be in the area near where we are now, and I would find myself looking at it. I would walk in, and I would see it change color. I would find myself looking at it. I would walk in and I would see it change color and I would get worried. I'm like, oh, I wonder what that's about. It's not even my KPI. I mean, I knew that they were on the ball. So it's just humans are very responsive to color. I mean, you think about visualization in general, right?
Yes.
It's not that we haven't had data for a million years, right? Imagine back to the old spreadsheets. And I don't know if you ever saw green bar paper, but these big sheets of numbers and metrics, only the most kind of committed businessmen have the energy to go through those and figure out what the numbers were.
Discern knowledge and the pattern from them. And then we had visualizations, which is like a lot easier to understand. Up and to the right is usually good, down is bad.
Yeah, red is bad.
So now we have more integrated and more robust ways to.
Yeah. So I think the fun thing about embedded, right? So from a business person's, if I'm like the CEO's perspective, embedded's really kind of an interesting thing because I can kind of make sure that everybody's following the right process and everybody's using the data to do what I want them to do. It's like a control and a process thing. It's a very much like we treat the human like a machine. right? Just insert this little piece of data into their brain so that they'll produce the right output and pull the right lever.
Yes, absolutely.
So what's important is from a human perspective, these metrics are really important as well. So you think about it not from a kind of a let's make our business more efficient, right?
Mm-hmm.
But humans naturally want to do their best job, right? They want to be them best selves. And frankly, a lot of people just aren't data people. They're not numbers people, right? I'm a geek. I'm a total geek. I would, if money was no object and, I could just do whatever I wanted. There are weeks where honestly, I would just sit in a room and play with data. I just would because I think it's fun. But there's a lot of people who aren't me, right? And they kind of feel overwhelmed by data, right? They feel overwhelmed by math. Maybe they had a bad math experience in high school. But if you told them what they were looking at when they see a KPI or a metric was math or statistics, they would be afraid. But it's friendly. It's colorful. If visualization is done well, it's really easy to understand, right? They don't need to understand the math to understand. You think about something like a trend line, right? That's like hardcore math doing predictive analytics. They just have to see the line and adjust their behavior to try to adapt. They don't have to know all this stuff. So what I love about kind of modern BI and the space that we're in is that everything we're doing, right? Everything we're doing is trying to make something that isn't new, to be honest, right? Like we're really honest with ourselves. People have been trying to use data since the 50s. But, how do we make it more accessible to more people? And our goal is to make it more, accessible to people who don't even care. Right? I mean, that's the total joke. It's like, because if you cared, you might go to your dashboard. You might make sure you had an extra monitor and you have that there. But embedded allows us to say, hey, let's expose everybody to this because we know there's actually some really great research that's been done in the last decade. I'm trying to remember. There's a paper in 2011 that was by this guy at MIT and another person at Wharton. I don't remember their names. He said, well, all right, we all say that analytics is super important, right? And in fact, it's been the number one choice on the CIO survey at Gartner for more than a decade, right? They survey every year. What are the top 10 IT projects, right? And all but 1 year, the top IT project has been BI and analytics. The top IT project has been BI and analytics, some format of that. So we know it's super important. We know that it's getting the funding, right? It's definitely something that people are putting their money behind. But what we hadn't quantified until this paper came out in 2011 was, is it really valuable, right? We think it's valuable. We kind of have this gut feel that it's valuable. And he ended up quantifying it and include lots of math here. And he said that you would be 5% more productive. So I don't know if that's useful or not, but it was kind of a funny thing, this 5% number.
So I guess one question would be, what are some of the most interesting use cases? Are there any interesting use cases of embedded analytics that you can remember off the top of your head, other than the ones you've talked about that sort of we're doing, but any that that a client has done that you're like, oh, that's a cool idea?
And this is just another Alexa story that might be interesting to include.
Okay.
So we have a client who's actually taken the APIs that we built out for Alexa and just taken them to a whole new level. And so not only can he ask Alexa a question about inventory, Alexa will actually say yes, and I ordered more.
Oh,
right?
Cool.
And that's just kind of like a really amazing example where not only are we infusing somebody's life with the Alexa, but that it's embedded right into the workflow, right? So that's really, really cool.
It's automatic.
Yeah, I think, traditionally people are putting them in web portals and applications, in things like Salesforce.com where you're embedding analytics directly in. Those are all pretty that's what embedded is for, right? And so it's all a similar version of the story, but that particular one is really, really fun. I think Sisense is really interesting in that Sisense takes embedded to a whole new level. And no particular client in this story, just lots of clients.
Sure.
So the traditional model is this, right? You have a single visualization or you embed it, or you could take a one dashboard page and embed it somewhere. That's called using an iframe. And the fun part, though, at Sisense is we have a lot of clients who take and embed Sisense in their products, but they they white label it. So they actually customize the fonts and the colors and the graphics and the URL and everything. So you'd never know you're using Sisense.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And they do white labeling to an extreme in some cases, where some of our clients give their clients the ability to build their own dashboards. And in a couple extreme cases, they actually give their clients the ability to create even data models.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it's part of, they have an offering, and as a component of their offering, they offer analytics, and although you wouldn't know it, that analytics solution is Sisense under the hood. And so it's completely referred to it. And so it's completely embedded as part of their business practice, like that, that whole portion of their offering. And more than half of Sisense's business comes from this kind of client, right? What we refer to as an OEM client.
Yeah.
More than half of our business comes from OEM clients, and that's really impressive. I often think of analytics as either enterprise, kind of traditional BI with dashboards, or embedded analytics, a product that wants to include analytics.
Yeah.
But there's really a lot of in between, right?
Okay.
So if one version of embedded analytics is, I have a product like Agencia, right? Or like the NASDAQ Investor Insights site, and I want analytics as part of that product. The product has other things going on. Analytics is just one of their capabilities that they're offering, and that's Sisense. It's embedded in their product.
Right.
But within an enterprise, I think of embedded analytics as a way to mature their BI offering, right? That's different. So in the OEM space, embedded is the way to enhance your product.
Yes.
And it's a very deliberate product decision. It's like if we decided that we were going to produce pizza, right? It's like, it's just saying something random, but we would decide we're going to add this capability to our product, and we would go and pursue that. In the case of a traditional enterprise, they're probably doing some amount of BI. They're doing some amount of reporting. They're probably progressed into the world of interactive dashboarding or modern BI tools. But they often don't think about embedded, right? Because it's a different, part of the problem is it's a different human being, right? So when you think about the simple visualization tools, this is about the business analyst. The business analyst gets their hands on some pretty simple data, and they make some pretty pictures, and they show it to people.
Right.
Tools like Sisense, when used as an enterprise BI application, a BI platform, right? There's a data person who gets data. There's the business analyst who often builds stuff, and then there's end users that use stuff.
Right.
But in order to go to that next level, you need to include developers into the mix, and that's just not something that most practices have done, right? But if you're in an enterprise and you have those resources available to you, using just traditional coding practices, you can take BI now almost within your own products, within your own company, within your own four walls. You can embed analytics. So, I came from a large enterprise in my past life, and we had lots of custom homegrown apps, right? You could imagine using the same platform to embed analytics into those apps. You could embed it into employee portals. You could embed it into things like Salesforce. And so it's really just a way of maturing a BI offering even within an enterprise.
Yeah.
And then that enterprise could go even further, right? And say they're going to deliver analytics to their customers, to their partners, to their suppliers. And if they were doing that, now they act like an OEM client, right?
Right.
But the beauty of Sisense, one of the most amazing things about Sisense is that we cover that gamut, right? Everything from the analyst trying to do some self-service work and, just build some visualizations to try to solve a problem, to delivering BI enterprise class BI to that OEM case. And in the case of a large organization, they could use the same platform for all of that.
Right.
What that means is that they can get a lot of reuse out of things that they do, right? So why wouldn't you want, the same data model and definitions and kind of ways that you describe things and visualize things to be the thing that you use internally and also externally, right?
Absolutely.
Or embedded in your app. And so being able to do that all from the same platform means when we say single source of the truth, right, we really mean like all the way through.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, that's great. So that kind of dovetails a little bit just sort of what we were talking. One of my next questions was going to be, what's sort of the next big turn in terms of like how you think embedded analytics will be used, or if that's already sort of starting to happen? It sounds like where these like large enterprises are using it on both ends.
Yeah, I think there are large enterprises using it in different places.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in many cases we still have enterprises that each department is kind of deciding on their own tools and doing their own thing, right? And so this will really explain how old I am. So I grew up in old school IT, right? Old school IT was responsible for everything, right?
Sure,
you wanted to install software on your laptop, brought it to IT, right?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, I pre-exist even the world of laptops. So the pendulum has swung, right? So the pendulum always swings, and sometimes it overswings, and we have to do a little bit of autocorrection. So there's a couple overswings, Jen. So there's a couple overswings here. One is the overswing away from IT, right? IT is, in one scenario, IT is the bad guy. People are like, oh, okay, like we don't want to go to IT, so we need to be able to do it all on our own. And then you have all these departments kind of running around doing their own thing,
right?
Trying to avoid IT. But, IT was never intending to be the bad guy. They have no great aspiration to be the bad guy. In fact, a well-functioning IT department believes of themselves, they think of themselves as a service provider.
Yeah.
Right? And they don't want to have long delays. They don't want to have difficult, hard to change stuff. It's just what they're stuck with in some cases.
Right.
So, I think that the pendulum swung way to the right or left, whatever, to the side where the businesses started implementing some of their own stuff without IT and avoided IT.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in a large company, that leads to a lot of, and so I think we're seeing now a slight swing back to more of a partnership between IT and the business units. It's really hard though, because we've changed, kind of emotionally, right? So it used to be whatever IT said was good, right?
Right.
And then we went to free for all, wild, wild west. The business can do anything.
Yep.
And now we've got to come back to a middle ground where the businesses have a lot of input, but IT has to be able to choose something that's going to work for the enterprise.
Yes, yeah.
And that's a really hard process, right? To get business units that have gotten a taste of being able to be wild and west to suddenly now have to do the same thing. So you just asked kind of changes in the enterprise. It's not so much embedded. It's just if you're going to have a platform that delivers on all these different use cases, right? Everything from the self-service to the whatever, to embedded, then you need to have some synergy and some kind of centralization of that. And that's hard. The other big swing, I think, in the last 5 years, has been, and this isn't so much about embedded, although I'll share a little piece of it there. So the swing is that 5 years ago, it was all about the business analyst, right? How to make the business analyst successful, and a little bit of, free-form navigation and some things for the end user. But the reality is that people were pretty focused on making the business analyst successful, and not a whole lot of other people within the analytic workflow.
Sure. Yeah, you had to make them happy.
Yeah, you had to make them happy.
Yeah. We weren't going to sell the product.
That's right. So we still care about the analyst, that's for sure. But I think that there's a lot of beauty in, certainly in Sisense, in being able to also do some things that empower the business user.
Sure.
So for example, in Sisense, there's a capable to anywhere. And that allows the business analyst to create a visualization that kind of has all the right data and metrics in it, but the end user can change it completely, right? They can change and look at it from any dimension. It gives them a huge amount of flexibility. What that means for the end user is that they get to kind of answer their question on the fly, and we can embed that capability. That's why it's super cool, right? So you might not predict every question that can be asked down the road. So we can embed these things that are super changeable. From the business analyst standpoint, they're still adding a ton of value because the end user would have never been able to kind of start from scratch. So they got them a place to start. And they don't have to clutter up their dashboards with every single permutation of a visualization.
Right.
They can just put in something they can put in the main one and then allow people to ebb and flow from there. So, this embedding more power than allow people to ebb and flow from there. So, this embedding more power than just a simple graphic, but embedding more and more interactive capability will be over time. So not only can you put the visualization there, but you can interact with it, you can make changes to it as an
end. Well, this is going really well because I was just going to ask about blocks now. So is this what you're talking about? It sounds a lot like that, right? Like,
well, blocks is a little bit different. So blocks kind of takes it to a different level. So let's talk about blocks within Sisense first, within the dashboard proper, and then the thing is that you can embed blocks. So blocks just allows you. Well, blocks has two things. One is it's pretty.
Yes.
It just allows you to create things that are a little more user-friendly and aren't so traditional BI looking, right?
Yeah.
So you can make them cute and add graphics and make them pretty colors and do all kinds of standard CSS and JSON. So that's cool. And that would be cool just if they were sitting in a dashboard, right?
Right.
Just these cute little widget things in the dashboard. They also, blocks is going to come with templates that allow you to do application-like functionality. And what that means is that some things that you might have left your dashboard to do will let you do directly in the dashboard.
Nice.
So it may be like the placing of an order, right? So I see a metric and I look at that and I say, oh, I better, order more paper towels. It's the last thing I added to my list at home. I could choose paper towels and click a button and it would add them to my cart or something, right? So we can start to add application-like functionality to the dashboard and start to do some more interesting things.
Very cool.
Which makes them even more interactive, right? So now it's not just about getting information from the dashboard in applications. So let's say, because it's just a Sisense object at that point, right? You can embed it. So if you had a little block that allowed you to place an order or something, right? Now you could place that anywhere, right? You could take that little block and you could embed it anywhere in your business, and that person would be, people would be able to place orders in exactly the same way no matter where they went.
Awesome.
And that's pretty cool. All of that is making the life of the developer easier. So we talked about kind of the old, 5 years ago, everybody was lightning focused on the business analyst. I think what we're seeing with embedded and including blocks is kind of a shift into thinking more about the developer.
Sure.
That developer
that makes sense.
Leverage the power of Sisense, right?
Yeah.
Wherever they are going, they could write the analytics themselves. I mean, developers are wonderful, genius creatures, right? Can do
very
anything,
capable,
and given enough time, can do anything. So they could write their own visualization. They could write all of this, right? And it would be fabulous. However, that's time that they could be spending on whatever their particular expertise is, right? So if they're in a healthcare company, they should be thinking about healthcare problems. They shouldn't be worried about how to make a pie chart. The last thing they should be worried about.
Because we already did that for them. We're letting them work smarter, not harder, as they say.
That's right. So, the reason why people, when you get into dashboarding, that's pretty straightforward, right? The kind of people, a business analyst, that are using the dashboarding capability or the basic analytic capability, they're not, they're not doing it so that they're not ever going to do it, right? Like I can't go code up a graphic.
Yes. Yeah.
I can a little, but philosophically I can't.
But you're not gonna.
I'm not gonna. Yeah, I could go do it in R, but it would be ugly.
Right.
Anyway, but most people need something to do it, so that one's pretty straightforward. But when we get into developer land, when we get into the embedded space, and you're talking about APIs and you're talking about developers, really what we're doing is trying to make their lives easier so that they can concentrate on the things that they're really, they're adding business value.
Yeah, their jobs.
Yeah, their jobs, but they're puzzle solvers, right? I don't know if you've ever hung out with developers, but they love solving puzzles, right? And so they're like, well, I could do that. Like, why wouldn't I just do that myself? I actually had a funny train trip. So every week when I'm on the train, I try to meet people.
Oh, cool.
Not everybody wants to hang out and chat with me, but sometimes I get lucky. And, one week I actually ended up sitting at a table of developers the whole ride.
Oh, cool.
And we talked a little bit about what we did, and they were like, well, I could just build that. I'm like, I know you could, because you're awesome. Yeah. However, don't you have better things to do with your time? He's like, oh, yeah, I do with your time. He's like, oh, yeah, I totally have better things to do with your time.
Well, that's where SciSense does the heavy lifting for him.
Right. But it's not even just about that, right? So now imagine you do have brilliant developers and they could write it themselves.
Right.
The problem is that within a large enterprise, you have many applications and many places where you need to put analytics. And if each development team is writing themselves, not only is that wasteful, but it's unlikely that it would be consistent. So
that's a great point.
Having a platform is you have now a consistent experience from the dashboard to the embedded analytics to, you're in Salesforce, you see the same thing. You want to see the same analytics no matter where you go.
No, that's a really great point. All right, so and this is all really you're a great guest, and I hope to have you on the show again. That kind of leads me to my next question: are dashboards dead?
No,
they're not. But
no.
I'm contractually obligated to ask.
No, they're totally not dead.
Contractually obligated to ask.
No, they're totally not dead.
Okay.
I think that this is a case of they're augmenting. Embedded analytics is for some users all they're ever going to see.
Right.
They're not going to go to the dashboard, but frankly, they're not going to the dashboard today. They may have access, but they're not going and they're not opening up a browser and doing it. They're just not.
Yeah.
So embedded gets analytics to those people. For those people that do use the dashboards and they also have, augmented analytics. Sorry, I keep saying augmented. Embedded analytics.
Yeah.
Analytics embedded into their workflow. For them, it's a nice reminder, right? But I generally will do my deep thinking at a dashboard. I'm really thinking through a problem. I'm thinking through a space. I'm trying to really understand it. And then, the embedded analytics in my workflow are just reminders and kind of ways. There's still plenty of people that need a dashboard. You get a density of information that you can't get when you're just embedding individual objects. And often the combinations of things together is very insightful, right? So
totally,
it's still a workplace to kind of play with your analytics, and I don't think it's going away anytime.
No, it sounds like what you're saying is that the people who need dashboards to answer questions are still going to the dashboard to answer those questions. Embedded hasn't completely circumvented all the different ways people are interacting with data. So we still need.
It depends on the complexity of the question.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think it's complexity and density. So if you have a really complex question, you're probably not going to get that from somebody embedded in your workflow, right? That answers a single question that is kind of right at the right time.
Yes. Yeah.
But the dashboard is, I'm going to just kind of deeply think about a space.
Yes.
And I'm going to, I'm not just trying to get a quick answer for a quick task.
Yes.
I think they're both equally important. I think of dashboards as a place for people to go who need that density and they need time to dig in deeply. But embedded analytics really gives us reach.
Yes.
Okay? It gives us reach into the organization. I'll add another point, which is there's been this long standing survey about adoption within the enterprise.
Yeah.
And, you get different numbers from different industries and from different surveys. So forget what the number is. I've seen a third a lot. But, there's always kind of devil in the detail on how the survey was done. But the reality is that in many industries, there's not more than a quarter to a third of the people that are ever going to use a dashboard.
Yeah.
Frankly, there's lots of people in the world who don't sit at a computer.
Yeah.
Right? So if you really want your enterprise to be data driven and to, tweak their behavior based on doing something analytics to them because they're never, ever going to see it, right? And it could be something as simple as the light bulb. But you can imagine I'm doing something, right? And if the machine's able to give me immediate feedback, then I can slowly adapt my behavior. You could use it, and there's so many different ways to use analytics, right? So in that example, I just might have a junior operator who's trying to get better at a task, right?
Right.
That's analytics. It's not, it's not data science level analytics, but it's analytics, and that's fine. Anytime we're using, quantifiable, measurable information in order to work. That's analytics. I love math.
Absolutely. Yes. Math is awesome. But, so you had a minor flub before when you said augmented analytics, but I did want to ask if we're seeing a shift from the user working hard to create analytics versus smarter systems that are kind of working for the user, providing analytics, sort of giving them guidance and putting the analytics where they need them. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think you're asking me about augmented analytics.
Yeah, one roundabout or whatever. Yes, but go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because the definition of augmented analytics is still one of those fuzzy things, depending on who you read and what flavor of the day we're on.
Right.
But augmented analytics to me is it's really the best of the future of being controlled by the robots. If we think about the robots that are coming, our artificial intelligence, machine learning, right? Robot is a physical manifestation of a really smart brain. But if we think about what this new technology, and it's not even that new, by the way, but what these emerging technologies can do for us, there's kind of the negative thing, which is that they can replace people's jobs, right? Yeah. Like, okay, they're going to automate us out of existence. I can jobs, right? Yeah. Like, okay, they're going to automate us out of existence. I can promise you that's not going to happen.
Right.
But, what they are capable of doing is doing a lot of the repetitive and kind of work that requires a lot of just trolling through stuff, right?
And they could do
that.
Tasks.
They could do that so quickly and then highlight what's interesting. Now, the joke is, if you've studied math, you get that not everything that is interesting from a math perspective is interesting from a human perspective. Yeah. So often the robots will get it wrong, right? So at a minimum, humans are required in order to tell them when, correlation and causation aren't the same. So that's one interesting thing. But the use of augmented analytics is often used today to say, how do I use AI and machine learning throughout the system to help surface things that a human might not have seen easily on their own?
Yes.
Or seen easily on their own.
Yes.
The way I think of augmented analytics or the use of AI and machine learning in BI, if that's how we're using the definition, is really to think about how can we use AI and machine learning not only to just make people's lives easier and do stuff that they would have done anyway, but faster, but how do we help people who are, again, not the numbers people, not the math people? How do we help them feel more comfortable with analytics? And there's a couple of really great examples. So a really simple one is SciSense Narratives, which allows you to add text to a visualization to describe the visualization. Right? So you add the text, it interprets the visualization, and then it writes some text that's descriptive of what's going on. You can imagine that that's super useful for somebody who is visually impaired, for example. They could just read the text.
Totally.
So it's very exciting for lots of cases. But I also think it's a nice, almost like an analytic coach, kind of pops up. Right, here are the things that I think really stand out to me, the computer. And over time, if you're reading those and looking at the visualization, you would imagine that you could get better at interpreting the chart on your own.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think of it as a coach and a mentor versus a job replacer.
Oh, I really like that. Yeah, it's augmenting the person.
Yeah. And we have, so I don't know when this article is going to come out.
Me neither.
Okay. SciSense Hunch, right, which you're familiar with.
Okay, great. So hold on. Let me stop you right there real quick because my last question was going to be, what kind of new analytical systems will embedded analytics take advantage of, say, in edge computing settings, parentheses, set up for Hunch discussion.
Oh, okay.
So take it away.
We're bleeding away. We were talking about augmented analytics, right? And, how do we use, I think of augmented analytics again as our kind of fiduciary duty to think about how we can use AI and machine learning best.
Yes.
It's simple about how we can use AI and machine learning best.
Yes.
Its simplest example is the computer makes charts for you.
Yes.
It's like not that exciting.
No. It's easy
cool.
to understand.
Don't get me wrong. It's easy to understand, right? SciSense Hunch is an example of, I don't know that I would go from augmented to SciSense Hunch. I don't make that leap in the way that you might be. So there's a lot of really awesome things going on with AI and machine learning. And I think, in this particular space around Sison's hunch, one of the most exciting things is being able to really break the mold on how we think about analytics, right? So the big mental leap for Sison's hunch, which is not by Sison's, I'm going to give credit to where credit's due, has been in the last few years where there was a breakthrough in thinking, just fundamental thinking. And that was analytics does fundamental thinking. And that was analytics doesn't need to be precise. When I ask what the weather is, when I ask what the temperature is going to be, I don't really care that it's going to be, 82.4 degrees.
Yes.
What I care about is it's going to be reasonably warm.
Right.
Right. So in these cases where super precision is not required, there's a lot of things that opens up, right? And that's opened up the gate for us to think about new and interesting ways of working with data. And Sison's hunch is a very new and interesting way to work with big data and allow us to bring the power of big data to the edge and to IoT devices, which in the past wouldn't have been able to benefit in the same way from big data.
Sure.
All of the solutions that exist today, including that novel one that I mentioned, which doesn't use precise answers, all of the ones that exist today require continuous access to the big data store.
Okay.
And so continuous access to the big data store, they're very limited in how and where we can use them. We can't use them at a distance at the edge, right? Because we can't query back. So Sison's hunch takes this idea that, it's okay to have a slightly imprecise answer, right? You got to kind of start with that, but that's okay.
Right.
But what Sison's hunch does is it trains what's called a deep neural net. It's a type of machine learning algorithm. It trains the deep neural net about the data source. And then it applies kind of a layer that allows us to query that deep neural net just as if it was the database itself.
Cool.
Right? So now the cool thing is that deep neural net is tiny. It's tiny.
Yeah,
it's megabytes.
Yeah.
Right? It's like much smaller would be an understatement, right? It's tiny, tiny, tiny. It's like the mouse and the elephant, right?
Okay.
It's tiny. And we can now take that little tiny thing and we can pick it up and we can put it wherever we want.
Nice.
And that, because we can do that now, worry about these big data stores and all this expensive equipment that goes along with them. We can just take the value from that big data and put it at, wherever we need it, and we can query it just as if we were querying the big data store. The other cool thing about the deep neural net is that, depending on how it's trained, but we can choose not to train it about any personal identifiable information.
Yes, yeah.
And if you do that, then now you are 100% certain that there's no personally identifiable information in that, so it's incredibly secure. So in cases like GDPR or HIPAA, places where you really have very strong regulatory concern around whether or not you've exposed that personal identifying information, you don't have to worry about it, right? You train the model, and then you can distribute the model wherever you want without any risk of exposure. And that's a pretty phenomenal thing too, but that's like a secondary benefit. The first really with big data accessible at the edge. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay, so there you have it. Just two people on the phone chatting about embedded analytics, normal, everyday stuff. And that's just a little taste. Embedded analytics is changing and growing every day. Be sure to sound off in the comments with how you're seeing embedded analytics used today and where you think it's going. Got questions or ideas about these or other analytics and BI topics? Leave those in the comments too, and you might just see them on a future episode. Thanks for listening. Please be sure to subscribe for all the latest episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Another new episode will be dropping soon, I promise.